talking about current social problems in Canada. And our guest speaker today is BarryWeisleder. He is an active socialist for 49 years, beginning in the Students and Vietnam anti-war movement in the 1960s. He's the founding member of Trotskyist parties in the 70s and 90s. He's an organizer and past president of the First Union for Toronto Substitute Teachers. He's 3 times elected to the executive board of the Ontario Public Service Employees Union in the 90s and member of the Provincial Council of the OSSTF from 97 to 2002. He's a member of the Ontario NDP Provincial Council off and on for 40 years. He is a chair of the NDP Socialist Caucus. He's nominated to be the NDP candidate in Thornhill constituency in 2011 until he was removed by undemocratic decision of the party establishment prior to the provincial election. He's the co-editor of Socialist Action newspaper, which you can purchase a copy of on the back table over there. He is the Federal Secretary of Socialist Action Ligue pour l'Action Socialiste since its founding in 1994. And without further ado, I would like for all of you to welcome Mr. BarryWeisleder. Thank you.
Like that? Yeah. Does that help? Yeah. Roja Bash. Shoni. I think I know one more word in Kurdish. Correct me if I'm wrong. BG? Long live? Yeah, okay. Because I went to a meeting years ago, and it was a meeting demanding freedom for Öcalan. And they were all chanting BG, Öcalan, BG. I hope you will pardon my poor pronunciation. You may be relieved to learn that the rest of my speech will be in English. As a socialist, I'm an internationalist who believes that solidarity knows no boundaries. My party, Socialist Action, stands in total solidarity with the struggle of the Kurdish people for self-determination. We condemn imperialism and all the governments under its influence that have denied the Kurdish people a state that you can call your own. For us, national liberation is a precondition for the emancipation of the working class internationally. No nation, no class that oppresses another people can itself be free. Karl Marx said that about the Irish and the British workers, the need for solidarity, more than 170 years ago. My task today is to begin a dialogue with you about how socialists intervene in the workers' movement in this country to improve living conditions and to advance the socialist transformation of society. I'm going to speak for about 40 minutes. Is that appropriate? Okay. So, in my view, we're living in truly extraordinary times. Just 4 days ago, the U.S. Donald Trump administration pounded Syria with 60 cruise missiles, killing several soldiers and civilians. The U.S. attack occurred without an investigation, without an impartial investigation, without any proof of who was responsible for the chemical gas fatalities, a horrible war crime that it was, that occurred earlier in the week. And we have Washington's travel ban aimed at Muslims in 6 countries, or people who appear to be Muslim, who appear to be Arab, who appear to be people from the Middle East or those countries identified by Washington. In Toronto, racists and fascists openly rallied at the Toronto City Hall 3 times in the last month. Not very many of them, but they're looking for an opening. And they target people of color. They target immigrant workers who they would like to discriminate against and exclude, and maybe even punish abroad. In Quebec City, a Canadian-born racist shot and killed several Muslims at prayer in a mosque. Where do these ideas come from? In the face of growing inequality, Canadian transportation giant Bombardier gives 50% pay increases to its failing, incompetent top executives who are in the process of laying off thousands of workers. This is also a sign of our extraordinary times. To be rewarded for failure in the executive suite. And we have a severe housing crisis. We have robots replacing workers. We have cops getting away with murdering black and mentally ill people. And we have a steady stream of lies from our photogenic Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. At the same time, we see a growing appetite for social and political change. It was reflected in the march of 4 million women and men on January the 21st across North America and beyond who demonstrated against the Trump agenda. And it's evident in campaigns to defend public postal services, to defend public libraries, of which this is a clear example of an important community resource, to defend Ontario Hydro and keep it public, and to win $15 an hour and fairness, and to organize the unorganized workers. And we saw it in the strike victory of the food service workers at York University. 200 workers, mostly immigrant women, who stood up and through effective action and solidarity that they achieved with other unions and other community organizations, raised the bottom wage to $15 an hour at that institution. Recently, 3 socialists in Toronto were elected to the executive of the Ontario Public Service Employees Union, a union of 130,000 members. And one of them is here, as a matter of fact. Julius, say hi. Socialists worked together to force an end to the leadership of the federal NDP leader Tom Mulcair, who conducted a regressive election campaign in 2015, who said, balanced budget no matter what, and we know that's code word for austerity. Socialists helped to defeat, 1 year earlier, the right-wing leader of the Canadian Labour Congress, Ken Giorgetti. So we see that change is in the air. Now I'd like to take a closer look at some of the issues that I just mentioned. Let's start with the housing crisis. Winter in Canada without a home is a death sentence. Dozens die on the streets in this country every year. In Toronto, the wait list of social housing is over 180,000 people. That's 180,000 applicants. Each of them may have a spouse, may have children, so you can multiply that number at least by 2 or 3. And the community housing stock that exists requires $2.6 billion in urgent repairs. People are living in squalor, under totally unacceptable and unhealthy conditions in Toronto housing. And yet there are hundreds of thousands who would love to have a home, even under those wretched conditions. Homes, houses. The average home price in Greater Toronto was $916,567 in March. How many of you can afford a mortgage for a home of close to $1 million? Not very many. And that amount, $916,000 to purchase an average house in the Toronto area, was up $228,000 from the same period a year earlier, according to the Toronto Real Estate Board. Housing costs have outpaced wage increases for decades. Wages, basically, have been frozen in this country for 30 years for most working people. If you're lucky enough to have a job, if you're lucky enough to have a job for 40 hours a week. Governments are considering a tax on vacant houses and condos to curb property speculation. But instead of superficial measures like that, a tax on unoccupied homes, we need the government to build 500,000 housing units immediately, a crash construction program, because the need is so urgent, with people dying on the streets for the cold or living under horrible conditions or couch surfing. And we need that construction, that urgent mass housing construction to be undertaken under public ownership and workers' control, not for the profits of the big developers who would rather build luxury condominiums. We need to make corporations and the rich pay for improved train and bus service. I talked to a worker here today, just 10 minutes ago, who told me it takes 2 hours to get to work. 3 buses he has to wait every morning, no matter how cold it might be, or how hot, and 2 hours more to get home after work. 4 hours of travel every day. We need to offer mass public transit to get the cars off the roads, to improve the quality of our air, and to make this city function properly. Good jobs are scarce. But good jobs are scarce not because of immigration, not because of immigrant workers. The scarcity of jobs increasingly is due to automation, and it's due to the cruel neoliberal capitalist agenda. According to the New York Times business section on March 29th of this year, and I quote, "For every robot per 1,000 workers, up to 6 workers lose their jobs and wages fall by 0.75%. Close quote. In the United States, between 1990 and 2007, robots were to blame for 670,000 lost manufacturing jobs. Almost 2/3 of a million. In the next few years, robots will quadruple. But you know, in a rational society, in a socialist society, this would not be something to fear. It would be a good thing for robots to eliminate boring and dangerous work, provided that the fruits of automation are shared equitably. How could they be shared? By shortening the work week without loss of pay and benefits, share the available work, increase the quality of work life, the safety of conditions of work, the quality of production through democratic economic planning. But capitalism and democracy are incompatible, particularly in the economic sphere. Sadly, this system is going in the opposite direction of sharing the work equitably, of giving the working class, which builds the robots, the fruit of their labor. Big companies are merging. They're killing thousands of jobs. Bombardier, I mentioned a moment ago, which produces trains and airplanes, although not on time. In fact, the city of Toronto is taking Bombardier to court because they didn't deliver trains and subway cars that were promised years ago. Bombardier bought a Montreal aircraft manufacturer in 1986. It's called Pratt & Whitney. It was a publicly owned enterprise at that stage. And Bombardier bought a Toronto aircraft company in 1992 called de Havilland Aircraft. And Bombardier got $1 billion from the Quebec government last year and $372 million more from Ottawa. Well, the company is increasingly shifting its work to low-wage Mexico. So this is a giant Canadian corporation which was encouraged to purchase public corporations to become an even more immense corporate entity. And it continues to receive subsidies from the Canadian government, and they're transferring more of their work in airplane construction to Mexico. So this company, which is incapable of delivering trains and streetcars to Toronto within the framework of the contract that they signed, it is giving its failing corporate executives a 50% wage increase. A 50% wage increase. So the chief executive officer of Bombardier, Hélène Bellemare, received last year in US dollars $4.2 million in salary and bonuses. This is the reward for failure in the executive suite. And yet there are many among us who struggle to put food on the table, keep a roof over our heads, send kids to university. This is the disparity. There's two Canadas. The Canada of the vast majority of working people and the Canada of the super rich. Now let's look at the world economy for a moment. Global inequality is growing. Half the world's wealth is now in the hands of just 1% of the population of the world. Half of the wealth in the hands of 1%. The so-called middle classes, you know, Trudeau loves to talk about the middle classes and how much he loves them. Well, they've been squeezed at the expense of the very rich, according to research by a big bank called Credit Suisse. And I quote, "Middle class wealth has grown at a slower pace than wealth at the top end. This has been reversed in terms of the pre-crisis trend, which saw the share of middle class wealth remaining fairly stable over time." So it's a shift from the previous pattern, and quite contrary to what the government claims it's going to do. And of course, the government refuses to change the tax laws, which benefit the rich. So we don't see this pattern, this direction changing anytime soon. On a world scale, there are 3.4 billion people, just over 70% of the global adult population, that have wealth of less than $10,000 total. A further 1 billion people, a fifth of the world's population, are in the $10,000 to $100,000 range, and that would include the value of their homes in most cases. What about the rest? Each of the remaining 383 million adults in the world, 8% of the world population, has wealth of more than $100,000. And this number includes about 34 million US dollar millionaires. About 123,000 individuals of those have more than $50 million, and nearly 45,000 individuals have more than $100 million. So you see how the wealth is concentrated into smaller and smaller numbers as you go up the economic pyramid. Now, the same report I'm quoting, wealth inequality has continued to increase since 2008, with the top percentile of wealth holders now owning 50.4% of all household wealth. That's the figure I mentioned earlier. The top layer controls over 50% of the total wealth. At the start of 2015, Oxfam, have you heard of this organization, Oxfam? Sort of a charitable group that says it is there to assist with development in third world countries. Oxfam warned that 1% of the world's population would own more wealth than the other 99% by next year. And Mark Goldring, who is the Great Britain Oxfam chief executive, said the following, and I quote, "The fact that it happened a year earlier than he predicted, just weeks after world leaders agreed to a global goal to reduce inequality, shows just how urgently world leaders need to tackle this problem. This is the latest evidence that extreme inequality is totally out of control. Are we happy to live in a world where the top 1% own half the wealth and the poorest half own just 1%? That comes from Oxfam's Great Britain chief executive, and Oxfam is not a revolutionary Marxist organization. Inequality, my friends, is the greatest concern of our age. So why do we tolerate rapacious, unjust tax havens, where millionaires and billionaires can put untold wealth in the Cayman Islands or some other place and pay no tax on it? The gap between economic growth and the well-being of Canadians widened considerably since 2008, the recession in that year. That is the conclusion of the Canadian Index of Well-Being, the CIW, the Canadian Index of Well-Being, which released its third national report in November. Now, this comes as no surprise to millions of people who personally experience precarious work, longer commute times, or rising rates of diabetes, and yet feel none of the promised benefits of resurging gross domestic product. Now we have statistics that shatter the myth of trickle-down prosperity. You've heard the expression since the Nixon years. Let the wealthy accumulate, they'll invest wisely, and the population will receive the benefits through trickle-down. I don't think they meant that the politicians would be trickling on them. They had something more economic in mind, but in fact that's what we're experiencing. So from 1994 to 2014, Canada's gross domestic product grew by 38%, while national well-being rose only 9.9%. So the value of what society produces went up, but not so much the well-being of the population. The Great Recession hit living standards hard, further depriving many of leisure, of volunteer time, even of sleep. How many of you are tired because you've been racing from one job to another, one responsibility to another, and we appreciate so much that you've come here on a Sunday afternoon when the sun is shining outside to listen to me tell you about all this doom and gloom. Well, it's not doom, but it is kind of gloomy, and we can deal with that through collective action. So the well-being index examined 64 indicators across 8 domains pertinent to quality of life. Over the past 21 years, the image that emerges is a gross domestic product which is rebounding from the crash, the Great Recession of 2007 and 8, but with ordinary Canadians paying the price. From 1994 to 2008, the living standards segment rose 23%, but then it plunged almost 11% and has yet to recover from that decline. Gains previously made in employment were lost. And I mentioned another one of the factors at work that contributes to that loss of employment: automation. While median family incomes have risen, millions struggle with food and housing costs. And when living standards drop, social, cultural, and political engagement declines as well. Now, the business pundits, the experts from the banks who are interviewed on television, they argue that the gross domestic product is fragile and that governments cannot afford to worry about well-being. We have to worry about increasing productivity. Don't worry about the people and their conditions of life. But the truth is that society cannot afford ongoing environmental degradation. It cannot afford the human and economic costs of poor health. It cannot afford the decline in equality and fairness. And yet it seems that's all that late capitalism has to offer us. So what's next? I want to conclude this talk on the fight that lies ahead and on what it will take to win, what it will take to improve things in our time. To save civilization, humanity, and life on Earth, capitalism must be eradicated because the dynamics that obtain within this economic system know no logic other than to accumulate and to accumulate and to accumulate, regardless, nature and the harm to humanity. And it will take a revolution to eradicate capitalism. It won't be done through a petition or an act of parliament. It will take a massive, joyous uprising of millions of people who say enough is enough. And there cannot be a revolution without a revolutionary party. Revolutions don't just happen spontaneously. Anger is spontaneous, but to concentrate that anger in a useful and effective way that brings more people into the equation of bringing about social change, that requires strategy, it requires a program, and it requires a definite political organization. Now, a revolutionary party is not self-proclaimed. I know if you go to a demonstration in Toronto or Tehran or Istanbul, you know, there are dozens of groups with their banners and they say, we are the Revolutionary Party. A revolutionary party is one that is an organization recognized by the vanguard of the working class that says, yes, they fight for us and we fight with them. We are one. A revolutionary party earns recognition as such by millions of workers. And it takes more than just slogans, even very good slogans like these. It takes more than slogans to change society. But a full program, including slogans, are necessary. And sustained revolutionary activity in support of these slogans and policies is absolutely required. Now, central to our program in Socialist Action is the fight for climate justice and a decent, democratic, and sustainable future for humanity. It includes the following elements. I just want to lay out just a few issues related to climate justice. First of all, we have to declare a climate emergency. We need to create a new climate agenda that begins with nationalization of the key sectors such as finance, energy, resource industries like big oil and gas, transportation, agribusiness, and automobile production. We have to restructure the economy fundamentally, and that has to be done by planning that involves workers, scientists, and environmentalists, and management must be elected by working class representatives. The top priority should be the rapid replacement of nuclear fuels with clean, renewable energy sources such as solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, and biomass. And by the way, the process of transitioning to those sustainable green energy sources will be the greatest job creator in the history of the world. It will not be less jobs. There will be more jobs. It might take thousands of workers to build a pipeline, but it only takes a few hundred to operate. But sustainable green energy technology is a permanent, massive job creator and puts humanity in harmony with nature. We have to stop the privatization of Ontario Hydro. We have to phase out the Alberta tar sands, defeat the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, and abrogate the previous free trade deals, which have nothing much to do with trade and have everything to do with corporate rights, intellectual property rights, making sure you pay 10 times as much for your medical drugs as you would need to in terms of the cost of actually researching and developing and producing medical drugs, for example. That's what those trade deals are all about. Protecting the patents, protecting the wealth of the gigantic pharmaceutical corporations and corporations in the other areas that I mentioned. We need to dismantle the polluting, wasteful, and dangerous war machine which is used to support imperialism. The US, the leading imperialist power in the world, has military bases, can anyone guess? How many countries?
Over 100.
Over 100 countries. Over 100 countries. And I'm not talking about Davy Crockett with an ancient gun standing in an outpost. I'm talking about sophisticated equipment with thousands of soldiers, Navy, and airmen who are stationed throughout the Indian Ocean, the Pacific, the Atlantic, and the Mediterranean. We need to close the military bases and send home all the soldiers and military contractors. We need to get this country, Canada, out of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which has just supported Trump's bombardment of Syria. We need to halt and reverse land-devouring urban sprawl by renovating the urban core of our cities. We need to restore wetlands, forests, and farmland wrecked by irrational capitalist development. We need to end dependency on the car by greatly expanding clean, safe, free, and convenient mass public transit. We need to support working farmers and farm workers with livable wages and benefits and shift away from chemical to organic agriculture. But that won't be done under capitalism because capital profits from the very things that we need to abandon in order to have a future for humanity. Now, please understand, when I said a moment ago that we seek to nationalize big oil and gas, it's not in order to continue drilling for fossil fuels or to make pipelines safe or more extensive. Our aim in seeking to nationalize the big energy corporations is to conscript the wealth accumulated by those energy pirates and devote it to the rapid green energy conversion, to build the windmills, to build the hydro dams, to build the geothermal energy drawing units, to do that
Towards
on
that
an emergency transition starting now. And this happens to be one of the only ways to fund the green energy transition that is so urgently needed. It will not happen as a result of negotiations in Paris or carbon taxes. That will only reinforce the power of the big corporations. The green energy transition will cost a lot of money, and we need to take it from those who have plundered the environment. Now, here's the key to unlock the door to liberation, the most important part of what I have to say to you. Such a program as I've outlined, and I've only given you a glimpse of it. I haven't even touched on several of the points on that banner. Just the points that I've mentioned. That program must be advanced and it must be won. And where must it be advanced? And how will it be won? That's the big question. That's the big question for militants who come from parts of the world where you have a rich labor and revolutionary tradition as you do. How can we do it here? Well, the way we're going to do it here is not dissimilar to the way this program is advanced in every other country around the world. The program must be advanced in the mass, working class organizations. It's as simple as that. That's the starting point. In the mass, working class political organizations. Why? Because that is where we can create the political basis for a workers' agenda. That is where we can develop and advance the struggle for a workers' government. Because our economic program has to have a political manifestation if it is to be realized. And that is what leads to a socialist revolution. Because the rulers, the undemocratic 1/10% who control the cops and the courts and the parliaments and the civil bureaucracy, they will not give up their power or privileges without a fight. And we've seen this in every country around the world for a century and a half. They will not give up without a fight. We have to anticipate the situation where after we win the elections, after we win popular opinion, they will undermine, they will subvert, they will assassinate, they will come after those who are the leading voices for change. We have to anticipate that, and we have to be organized to resist that and to overcome that. So how can we begin to do it? I mean, obviously in this country, revolution is not on the agenda today. But struggles to improve our conditions of life and struggles against our class enemy who will stand in the way of progress now and revolution tomorrow, they have to be advanced concretely. So we see some very encouraging signs. How many of you have heard about the LEAP manifesto? Only one? Okay, 2 or 3 of you. Well, it's an environmental, it's an eco-socialist document. It's available on the table there, and it was circulated over 1.5 years ago. And at the NDP convention a year ago, April, the convention endorsed it for discussion across the entire party. Unfortunately, the bureaucrats who run the NDP have not facilitated the discussion, so it's only occurred in about 30 districts out of 327. But the LEAP manifesto talks about the need to make the green energy transition and for respect for Aboriginal peoples, for restitution, and for raising the minimum wage, and for a future with free education for young people. It lays out a lot of these important ideas. That document, which has the support of the majority of Canadians, according to opinion polls, even a majority in the Liberal Party, even 1/3 of the Conservative members support the LEAP manifesto, that opens the door. But we need more than just a document that raises some interesting ideas. We need concrete policies, and we need a political campaign to achieve them. The NDP is a means by which the working class can advance socialist policies and fight for them under present conditions. And inside the NDP, we have something called the Socialist Caucus. And one manifestation of that is this magazine, which some of you have on your seats. Turn Left is the magazine of the Socialist Caucus. A new edition is coming out in a week, but this was the latest edition. So the work of the Socialist Caucus which campaigns for socialist policies in the NDP, is one way of advancing this agenda in a major working class organization in this country. Without any illusions, we don't think that this party will become a revolutionary party, and we don't rely on its leadership, but we do want to reach its voters and members, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But going beyond the fight for socialist policies in a mass workers' party and within the unions, we still need a revolutionary party which will take the struggle further. And that is what we believe is necessary, what we strive to organize. So let me give you a short profile of Canada. How many of you are relatively new to this country, say arriving in the last 2 years? One fellow. 2, okay. Welcome. So here's just a sketch of Canada utilizing a Marxist class analysis. The population of Canada in 2015 was 35.7 million. 35.7 million. A very, very big country. There's probably 35 million Kurdish people in the world. 37? Yeah, so imagine your peoples, but spread out across 6 time zones. Almost 36 million. 85% of the 36 million, 85% of the 36 million are workers. 80% are workers, including their children and their family dependents. Less than 15% of the Canadian population are petty bourgeois. By that I mean self-employed, top professionals. Less than 1% of the population own the major means of production, distribution, and exchange. The big corporations, the big banks, the big development landowning firms, and the big commercial enterprises. So, 36 million. With a workforce of 20 million, approximately 30% of that 20 million belong to unions. 30%. 30% of the workforce belong to unions. It used to be close to 40%, but we've seen a decline in the level of union organization in this country. In the United States, it's much worse. It's catastrophic. 12% are in unions. And in the private sector, 6%. You go onto a construction site in the United States, or any big private firm, and chances are you'll look a long time until you find a union member. So Canada is a little bit more like Europe in that sense. 30% belong to unions, 30% of 20 million. About 4 million workers belong to unions that are affiliated to the Canadian Labour Congress. The Canadian Labour Congress will hold a convention in Toronto very soon, in just a month or so. The Canadian Labour Congress and its 4 million members that belong to 30 or 40 unions that are affiliated to it is in turn linked to the New Democratic Party. The New Democratic Party was founded in 1961 based on a merger between the Canadian Labour Congress and a socialist party that was founded in the 1930s called the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation. So the CLC and the CCF got together in 1961 and created the New Democratic Party. But even the name is problematic, New Democratic Party. They wanted to have like a slightly more left version of the US Democratic Party, which is not a labor party at all. But anyway, you can't take away from the fact that the NDP is a working class labor party in this country, regardless the name that the founders attached to it. So in the October 2015 election, the most recent federal election, 25.6 million people were eligible to vote. 25.5 million people were eligible to vote. How many voted? 17.5 million voted. About 68.5% of those who were eligible to vote. So a lot of immigrant workers are not eligible to vote. They make that you work, they pay you, you can live in this country for quite a few years, but you don't have the right to vote. What a scandal that is. In my view, if you're good enough to work, you're good enough to vote. But that's not the way the rules operate in this country. So 17 million voted, about 68% of those who were eligible to vote, excluding the people that I just mentioned. The NDP received 19.7% of the votes. That's about 3.5 million votes, which was down from 2011 when the NDP had well over 4 million votes. 3.4 million votes, that's still an important number. The capitalist parties, how did they do? Well, the parties of Bay Street, they got all the rest of the votes. How did that vote break down? Well, the Liberals got 39.5%. They didn't have a majority. They got a majority of seats, but they didn't have a majority of the votes. They certainly didn't have a majority of the votes of the people who were eligible to vote, but didn't. So the Liberals got 39.5%, the Conservatives 32%, the Bloc Québécois 4.7%, and the Green Party 3.5%. So the NDP got about 20%, and the other 80% of the votes that were cast went to the capitalist parties. Big parties, small parties. So that summary shows you, in part, the task facing the working class today. Think about those numbers. I know I'm sorry to throw a lot of numbers at you. I should have had an overhead projection, but I think the picture will come into focus in a moment. The task facing the working class is to win over a large part of the 80% who still vote for the parties of Bay Street, who still vote for the Liberals and Conservatives, who still vote for the capitalist parties. We have to win over a large part of that 80%. But that's only part of our task. Only part of the task. Because you see, inside the workers' movement, we face the agents of the bourgeoisie. We face the labor lieutenants of capital. You ever heard that expression? The bosses, they have people to keep order in our ranks. The labor lieutenants of capital, who are they? They are the labor and NDP bureaucrats who collaborate with the bosses. They vote for austerity budgets. They want to appear responsible. Responsible to who? They vote for military spending. Now in the NDP caucus, in the wake of Trump's bombing of Syria, and we don't support the dictatorship of Assad, don't get me wrong, but that's for the Syrian people to deal with him, right? Right now in the NDP caucus in Ottawa, they're in disarray. Some of them are saying, well, bombing never solved any problem. Others are saying, well, you know, we have to go along with this and support the bombing. They're confused. You hear different messages. It's kind of disturbing that they couldn't respond the way Jeremy Corbyn, the left-wing leader of the British Labour Party, who said, we are against intervention. Yes, the poison gas attack was a war crime, but we don't know who did it. And whoever did it must be held accountable. That doesn't justify bombing, violating the national sovereignty of Syria by the United States, or any power for that matter. So these Labour and NDP bureaucrats, they waver. They don't stick to class principles. And they sometimes and often end up supporting reactionary positions for military spending, for cutbacks, for giving millions and millions of dollars to automobile corporations and to other manufacturing firms to try to keep them operating in this country instead of taking control, investing in them, and making sure that they produce to meet the needs of the population under workers' control. These bureaucrats, these agents of capital in the workers' movement, they put their personal petty interests, they put their personal careers within the state apparatus ahead of the interests of the working class. They undermine the class political independence of workers at every step. Because, you know, as they weaken the position of the NDP and capitulate to what the Conservatives and Liberals say, more workers think, well, if I'm going to vote for the parties of the system, I'll vote for the real capitalist parties. Why should I vote for a fake capitalist party that, you know, claims to be on the left and really isn't? So it undermines the position of the workers when these leaders adopt the positions of our class enemy. The pro-business bureaucrats must be replaced, in our view, must be replaced by class-conscious revolutionary workers. How will these revolutionary workers come forward? How will they develop the class consciousness necessary in order to change society? Well, class consciousness develops only in the struggle of the working class itself. The struggle against the bosses, and also the struggle inside the workers' movement against the agents of the bosses. So we have to fight on two fronts: inside our organizations, and of course against the parties of Bay Street, against the corporate giants. So that is why, in summary, socialist action is engaged in the struggle inside the mass working class organizations. Because sometimes people say to me, "You're a Marxist, Trotskyist, revolutionary. Why are you wasting your time in the unions and the NDP? These are reformist organizations." Because we're serious. We're serious. We know that there'll be no change unless the working class decides to make change, until it's organized with the necessary level of consciousness to come together and say, today we fight for fair wages. Tomorrow we fight for more. We don't want just a piece of the pie. We want the whole bakery under workers' control. You'll find many groups, as I said earlier, you go to a demonstration in downtown Toronto, many groups call themselves socialist, and you'll see that most of them are not involved in the working class organizations. They stand on the sidelines, they watch, and they talk to each other, but they don't talk to the workers. We talk to the workers, like you. That's what we're all about. Socialist action has a working class orientation. It might seem unnecessary for a socialist to say that, but unfortunately it is very necessary for a socialist to say that, especially in this country, because there are so many distractions and so many groups on the left that content themselves with talking in the cafe to, petty bourgeois intellectual students, but not talking about workers on the picket line fighting for better wages, for jobs, to share the products of automation, and to stand up in solidarity with the victims of imperialist intervention. That's what we are all about, and that's where we are. We're trying to build a disciplined working class party inside our class, and that is the heart of our strategy for revolutionary change. Slogans are not enough. You do need a party, but you need an organization, and an organization is not enough. It has to be in the heart of the working class. That is key. And what do I mean by that? Well, we fight for socialist policies, and we run candidates for executive office in unions and the NDP, right? I was on the executive of my provincial union for years. Julius was just elected. He's a leader of socialist action too. He was just elected to the OPSU executive board. It wasn't an accident. It was the result of years of work. Handing out leaflets, developing programs, making speeches, organizing educationals, going to where the workers meet in the local workplace and on a regional basis as well. The progress we've made is a result of that working class orientation. And the same is true in my teachers' union and in other unions. Our goal is to build what we call class struggle, rank and file bodies. So in every union, you need to have a core of workers who understand socialist ideas, who have a class analysis of society and the world, and who share that with their co-workers locally. And in every union, these caucuses have to link up together and fight as they did at the recent convention of OPSU for the total leadership of the provincial organization. And they have to link up with other workers across the country organizing class struggle caucuses in their organizations to fight for the leadership of the Canadian Labour Congress and to fight for the leadership of the NDP, which is affiliated to these union organizations. That's why in the NDP we are leaders of the Socialist Caucus, which has won many policy victories at big party conventions, like the LEAP Manifesto, like Canada out of Afghanistan, like the fight for free post-secondary public education. We were in the forefront of that fight, and we are struggling to get Andrea Horvath to articulate that position going into the next Ontario election, a position that was adopted because of our successful argument for it. Right now, the NDP is engaged in a federal leadership race. There are 4 registered candidates so far, and there will be, I hope, at least one more. We are organizing to persuade a leftist union leader by the name of Sid Ryan, former president of the Ontario Federation of Labour, to run for NDP leader. We have a website, very sophisticated, 17 beautiful policy planks, and a team from coast to coast that's ready to get started with fundraising and organizing for this leadership campaign the moment he registers. We're advancing socialist policies and running a team of candidates for the provincial executive at the Ontario NDP convention. That happens April 21st and 23rd. The new edition of our magazine will show pictures like these of the many, many, many candidates we're running for the executive of the Ontario NDP. We will distribute over 1,000 copies of the new edition of this magazine at that convention. And we will play a big role in the policy debates that take place on the floor in front of 1,100 delegates at that convention, which occurs in 2 weeks. I say to you, you should come. You should be there at the convention as an observer. See how socialists fight for a workers' agenda in a mass working class party. If you want to be involved in Canadian working class politics, if you want to breathe, smell, feel the culture of the class struggle in this country, then come and see for yourself. See how socialists fight for socialist ideas. Not just in the hallway, not in the cafe with intellectuals, but on the floor where the workers, the delegates from unions are gathered to discuss what to do next. Some of them listen only to the bureaucrats, but some of them have an open mind. They listen to what we say too. And sometimes they vote for our proposals and they join us. So I invite you to come there to see how we are doing this kind of work. In conclusion, comrades and friends, the battle for socialism, for public ownership and workers' control must be waged. Everything depends on it. Everything. The future of humanity depends on it. We have to get off carbon and into green, sustainable energy systems, break with the war machine, jobs, housing, education, healthcare. That's the path forward. Will it be easy? It won't be easy. But take heart. You're not alone if you join the socialists who are already doing this work. And that's why I say you should join Socialist Action. We look forward to working with you, and I'm here to answer your questions now. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Weisleder. I think maybe we should take a quick 5-minute break and then...
Okay. Let me stand here. Hi everyone. I have to... I have two things I would like to ask Barry here. Thank you for his speech. Mostly it was headlines. a lot of issues in the speech. So
Yes.
I have 2 points. The first point is about he talked about U.S. imperialism and what they did, what this new political era now. He talked about these stuff, but everyone catch what the political Islam doing now, what they under the name of the terrorism, those definitions, but it's a political Islam. What they do in the Germany, in the UK, in the Sweden, even in Canada, even in US, everywhere in the world. So what's your position about that? In Canada, we know what they do. They try to bring the Sharia law in Canada. They try to change the schools to the mosques. people come and then pray there, and I don't know what else. And kids, they don't allow to go to the music class, to the swimming class. I don't know everything. They wanted to push it there. What's your position? What's your about the political Islam? The second thing, Barry talking about the party, struggling party or revolutionary party, but he is a member of the NDP. There is two things he talked about. One is the mass organization of the workers. Another thing is about the party, relation between them. I am with Barry about the mass organization, working between the classes, working with the classes. I am a worker. I am communist. I am worker. I am in between of them. So we have to organize our class against the bourgeoisie, against the capitalism. That's right. But when you talk about the party, political party, you're supposed to be talking about the political party for the workers. What's the what's the policy of the revolutionary party? I don't think the NDP representing the workers. Maybe 90% of the NDP is workers. Maybe that. But I don't know how I consider NDP is representing the worker class in this. So I think this is something is not clear for me. How you build a revolutionary party in Canada? That's my question. Thank you.
Should we answer and then?
It's up to you. You want to say?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for your question. Good question. I'm quite familiar with both questions, and I'll do my best to answer them briefly. Political Islam represents a very backward trend that attacks and divides the working class on religious grounds. Even within the community of Islam, it tends to advance a very narrow and conservative agenda. But as a Marxist and as an atheist, I defend freedom of religious expression. I believe that the way you're going to win people to a progressive and humanistic and secular point of view is not by forcing them, not by banning their religion, but by showing that there is a more enlightened path, by providing scientific proof about the workings of nature and humanity. Now, as it turns out, political Islam was an instrument of American foreign policy. Who supported the Taliban? Who supported Saudi Arabia and the Wahhabi religion and the mosques that were creating the basis for the battle against the PDPA administration in Kabul? The progressive, secular leadership of the Afghan state, which was, of course, in a diplomatic and economic alliance with the former Soviet Union. When Washington says that it's against Daesh, where it's against ISIS, they're being supreme hypocrites. Supreme hypocrites. Because they supported these forces in their alliance with Saudi Arabia to smash the left in Syria, to smash the left in Iraq, and to topple the progressive government in Afghanistan, which introduced co-ed schools and land reform. Now, the Afghan government of the 80s had its limitations, and there were factional divisions within the PDPA. There was the Kalk faction and another faction. And that had a lot to do with the Stalinist nature of that party, and undemocratic nature of that party. But do we take the position that some opponents of political Islam advocate in terms of relations between Ottawa and Tehran? Because when Stephen Harper broke diplomatic relations with Iran, I know there were some campaigners against political Islam who cheered. They said, good, that's a blow against political Islam. But it wasn't. It wasn't. It was a blow against working class solidarity. it was a blow against the efforts to ease relations between East and West so that workers could travel, discuss with one another, and find their path to social and political liberation. So I think the campaign against political Islam in the abstract is good, but some of the aspects of it, like supporting a break of diplomatic relations with Iran or other countries that have, clerical Islamic leadership, I think that's very bad. Very, very bad. It furthers the interests and the aims and objectives of imperialism. We have to be for diplomatic relations between and amongst all countries, and we have to support the efforts of our class in each and every country to achieve their liberation. But the same is true in our communities here in this country. I'm a teacher, and in the Toronto District School Board, there are spaces in our secondary schools where Islamic students can pray at different times of the day. It's not part of the school curriculum. It doesn't prevent anyone from participating in sports or any other activity. But in Peel District School Board, right now, there's a big furor about allowing space for Islamic students to pray during the school day or after school hours on school property. Who is behind this campaign? This campaign of intolerance, of hatred towards people whose skin is darker, who come from a culture different from the predominant one here. Who's behind this? Right-wing Christian evangelicals, fascists, racists, people who want to bar the door to refugees from Iraq, Harperites, conservatives, Kevin O'Leary. That's who's behind this campaign. They're the scum of the earth, those forces. They want to divide the working class. I say, as a teacher, as a taxpayer in a public school board in Toronto, like the one in Peel, let the students pray. Because their younger brothers and sisters probably won't wear the hijab, probably won't pray. But if you deprive them, if you stigmatize them, if you isolate them, if you target them, their mosques' windows will be broken, and someone will get the idea to pick up a gun and go and shoot them, as they did in the mosque in Quebec City. 6 people murdered and others injured. Why? Just because they were there. And that breeds suspicion between this community and the rest of the working class. So I say we need tolerance, we need to be inclusive, and the way to persuade people away from superstition and views that are backward and have a negative impact on women and other gays and lesbians and other people in the population who simply want to live their lives to reflect who they are and what they are. The way to overcome that is by advancing scientific argument, not by exclusionary policies, not by barring certain practices, even on public property, as long as it doesn't interfere with the school curriculum. We cannot fall into the trap of going along with the Christian evangelicals and the right-wing forces in society and the conservative right-wing by barring certain practices in the schools. The NDP. Well, I did address it a bit in my talk. I'll simply add a couple of thoughts on this subject. I mentioned Canada has a population of about 36 million. I mentioned that about 20 million are eligible to vote. And I mentioned that, I forget the numbers, I'm not going to look it up, about 15, 16, 17 million actually voted, and the NDP got 20% of that. 19.7.
17 to 19.
Yeah. So that's a minority. 19.7% is a relatively small minority. The other 80% are voting for the policies and the leaders and the parties of Bay Street. Now, within the world of the NDP electorate, that 19.7%, that 3.5 million voters, what percentage do you think the revolutionaries have? The Marxists, the revolutionary socialists, the labor class struggle fighters? Very small, right? Not even the percentage that they enjoy in the Kurdish community, not even the percentage they enjoy in Kurdistan, you know, in Iran or Iraq or Turkey or Syria. The revolutionaries in this country are very, very small. How can we get bigger? Well, most of the Canadian left believes that the way to be bigger is to situate yourself on the sidelines, in isolation, and you talk to yourself. We don't agree with that view. We don't agree with that view. Because those groups have existed for a lifetime. They're going nowhere. When we engage in working class politics, we do it where the workers are. But we don't make any concessions. You know, who hates the Socialist Caucus in the NDP the most? The NDP leaders, the union bureaucrats, the officials. What's the average income of the folks in this room? Most of you earn less than $50,000 a year? Am I right? Less than $50,000 a year? Maybe less than $20,000 a year? The union bureaucrats, they earn over $100,000 a year. $100,000 is the minimum. The minimum. And they have privileges and long vacations. And they work long hours at times, but at other times they take off whatever they want. They are for the status quo. Right? They hate us. They would rather we followed the policy that says, oh, the NDP is a political party that's pro-capitalist. We should have nothing to do with it. They would be so happy. So happy if we were not there. So happy. We don't want them to be happy. We want them to be unhappy. We're there. Not just to make them unhappy. That's just a pleasant byproduct. We're there fighting for the working class. Free public education. Universal child care. Quality child care. No pipelines. Green energy transition. No wars abroad. Money for jobs. Money for education. Money for health care. We're fighting where it counts. We're fighting where thousands of workers gather and where millions of workers vote. Do they have illusions in this party? Do they think that this party is something that it is not? Will this party betray them? Yes, yes, and yes again. Absolutely. But how do you break someone from their illusions? Do you walk away from them and stand over there in the corner? Or do you talk to them face to face and say, yes, brother, yes, sister, I understand your situation. I'm with you. I even vote for your party. I even belong to it, but I have a different program. We have a different team. We will not compromise on these ideas. We will not compromise on these ideas. You can stigmatize us, you can criticize us, you can even expel us. We'll still come back in your face because we're part of the working class. And the NDP is a working class party. If the NDP had no connection with the unions, we'd have to consider whether we should be there. We'd have to think about it. It would depend on the circumstances, but probably we wouldn't be there anymore. So we're in this fight for a lifetime, and it doesn't matter what the NDP leaders say, we're there because we want to win the million rank-and-file voters to socialist policies. And the only way to do that is to talk to them, to struggle with them, to work with them on the issues that matter to them. And when there's an election, should we be neutral? The parties of big business, the banks, the giant corporations, the billionaires who put their wealth in the Cayman Islands so they don't have to pay taxes, they're not undecided. When the election comes, they know exactly what they're going to do. They give thousands, tens of thousands of dollars to the Conservatives. They give tens of thousands of dollars to the Liberal Party. Even some give money to the Bloc Québécois or the Green Party. It's a few thousand of dollars, but they're not ambiguous. They don't have to stop and think about it. They know exactly where their class interest lies. We have to have the same response, a class response. We support the working class organization, but we don't support the leaders, and we don't necessarily support the policies, unless there are these policies. We fight for these policies. That's how we can move forward. We want to break out of the isolation of the revolutionary left. We want to break out of the isolation of certain radicals in certain immigrant communities. And to do that, we have to go into the mainstream. And if you believe in your ideas, then you have nothing to worry about. It's only those who don't have confidence in their ideas who are afraid to go into the mainstream and fight for those ideas. We're not afraid. We're confident. We have 170 years of experience from the days of Marx and Engels. Their ideas have been confirmed over and over again. And that's why we confidently fight for those ideas, elaborated and modernized to present world conditions. That's our path to a majority. From a minority to a majority through the working class organizations. And in the NDP and the unions, we're building the seeds for a revolutionary party. And that seed will grow, and then there will come a point where, as in Europe, the revolutionary left has not a few dozen or a few hundred members, but has tens of thousands of members. And then the masses will know that we are separated from liberalism and social democracy. They'll know quite well, because we will have worked with them all this time to that point where we're in the position to challenge for power.
Jean-Paul, is it your turn? Okay, my question is about the minimum wage. I know you have a lot of good demands. You have one example I take is the minimum wage. It's been a few years I heard from Socialist Action you demanding for raising minimum wage. Last year you said 14, now you say 15 per hour. That's good. But my question is, what's the government reaction? What's government response for this for your demand? And do you think there is there's a wrong technique in your strategy why this demand doesn't go into practice? Thank you.
Okay. Well, actually, our position, Socialist Action, is not for $15. We say that the minimum wage should be $18 an hour because the cost of living continues to rise. It rises by about 2% a year. The campaign to raise the minimum wage actually started about 15 years ago, and the demand was $10 an hour then. And then there was a big fight in the NDP, over whether to support $10 or $15. So when this fight occurred, we said we need to raise it. We need to raise it. And we played a crucial role in raising it. But that was 4 years ago, right? So now we say 18. But the important thing is not the dollar amount. And I'll talk in a minute about why we haven't achieved the goal. The important thing is not the dollar amount. Whatever we say it should be, we should say and adjusted in accordance with the consumer price index. There should be an automatic escalator clause. Whether it was 15 4 years ago, or $10 an hour 12 years ago, or $18 an hour now, we should say this amount plus a automatic cost of living increase. So as the rate of inflation rises, even if it's only 2% a year, there should be an automatic increase in the minimum wage. Now, why hasn't this demand been achieved? Well, the labor movement hasn't fought for it. The labor organizations are only now beginning to get behind it. We need a much stronger campaign. There's a campaign called $15 in Fairness, and we support it, even though we're for 18. But you know, there's a real campaign. So you don't refuse to give support because it's not exactly your own slogan. You support the campaign and you say, we need to go farther. We need to fight for more. So that's what we do. We're supporting the existing campaign, and we say that there should be an automatic increase to reflect the rising cost of consumer expenses, what they call the shopping basket of goods. And there's an annual measure of inflation in accordance with the essential things that people need. Not vacations, but housing, food, clothing, etc. Those essential items. So the reason we haven't achieved it is because most of the labor organizations have not really supported this campaign aggressively. Some labor organizations which are supporting it now are saying that, well, they have their own campaign. They're not supporting the main existing campaign, but they're putting up a parallel campaign. Maybe Julius will talk about this because he knows about this aspect. So that's a problem where there's divisions in the workers' movement about how to wage and win the campaign. That's a problem too. But there's another problem. I guess you call it the elephant in the room. Unions are getting weaker. Why are they getting weaker? Why do they represent 30% of the workforce now, when 25 years ago they represented 40% of the workforce? Why do you have the catastrophe in the United States, where it's only 12%? Well, because we've had decades and decades of labor leadership that has been pro-capitalist, pro-management. They've not fought to organize the unorganized. They've relaxed in their comfortable union buildings with their cushy salaries and lengthy vacations and other privileges. So the unions have been shrinking in size. In the United States, it's particularly bad because there isn't even a labor party in the United States. No labor party. The unions don't have a political party. They have two of them in France, they have them in Spain, they have them in Britain, all across Europe, in Asia, Africa, Latin America, but in the United States, no mass working class party. Now you could say, well, such a mass working class party would be reformist, pro-capitalist. We don't need that. We need a revolutionary workers' party. Well, I agree, yeah, but when you don't have at least a party based on the unions, and you have union leaders supporting Donald Trump, build the wall, drop the bombs, block the immigrants, that's what you get, right? So it would be a great step forward for the American workers to create a labor party and to fight for raising the minimum wage, instead of giving their money to Democrats and Republicans who are screwing them every chance they get. That's a dead end. That's a very bad policy. Not just because I say this, but because the proof is there, concretely there. So we need a class struggle leadership of the trade unions to organize the unorganized, to defeat austerity, to put an end to two-tier. Why should young workers be paid less than other workers? You get a job, and you find that the person beside you who's been in the company for 10 years is paid $5 or $10 an hour more than you. How does that make you feel? Why should that be? Because union leaders allowed it. Instead of going on strike and fighting this, they said, well, we don't want to lose all the jobs, so we better just, hide under the table and just go with the flow and, take a few punches, and someday things will get better. No, that doesn't work. The only thing the workers ever get is the stuff that we fight for. You have to fight. You have to be ready to fight. When you stop fighting, you lose ground. I like to use the tug of analogy. There's a rope, and you've got a bunch of people pulling on this side, and another bunch of people pulling on the rope at that side, and a flag in the middle. What happens if some of the people here take a lunch break? They lose. This side pulls, they win, it's all over, man. So you got to be pulling on that rope all the time. until we have a society where there is no more tug of war, where one class represents humanity, controls the economy. But as long as we have a class-divided society, you've got to keep
So
pulling.
you brought it
And the labor,
for like 5-10 minutes
of course,
discussion, right? So
Right.
I just start with, I'm a QP member, local 1397. So I've been with the QP for 10 years now. Okay, I've worked within a non-profit organization for 10 years. You talked about the leadership. They are bureaucratic, but the question is, what's in it for you? As a socialist action, what are you doing there? They are bureaucrat, they don't have a base. I can tell you from the recent election with the poor outcome after Jack Layton's passing, NDP had a very poor result. You mentioned the millions of votes, but those millions, I don't think personally that came from the unions. Given the fact that QP, OPSU, CAW, all of these hundreds of thousands of members in their ranks, and yet the outcome was extremely poor on a provincial level, on a federal level. So in your view, what do you think, why did this happen? Where are you guys lacking as an NDP or as socialist action as part of the NDP? This is one question. The second question, you mentioned a number of things in terms of factories, the managements and the corporations, big giant corporations, but you never unfortunately touched the banks. And the banks, they, as a matter of fact, they, every single person in this country is involved with the bank one way or another. You go from the credit card to student loans to mortgages to factories everywhere. Okay, but I would love to hear more from you about those banks and what is your stance towards these banks, especially they are the actual government of this country, and even few months ago there are a number of legislations that just like went under the radar by Justin Trudeau that allow banks to operate more freely. That I'm sure many of these gentlemen or the audience didn't hear about it. So, and I want to hear that something from you in that regard. And lastly, you mentioned something about. Samir just mentioned something about Sharia law, and you mentioned something about school and segregation. I wouldn't say segregation, but exclusion of these things. To my belief that I have to disagree with you, our schools must remain secular. And when I say must remain secular, that does not target Muslims, does not target Christians, does not target Jews or any other religion. It should be free of any type of religion. This is not about racism, it's not about discrimination, it's about secular society. I'm sure many in the room agree with me that this country is not secular. The country that celebrates Christmas is not a secular country. No matter how we want to put it out there, it's not a secular. A country that celebrates or people are given the right to celebrate, and you can take a day off, and it's a paid day off. And I see that the Ontario Teachers Federation, when they give Muslims a couple of days to celebrate Eid, when they give Jews to celebrate their Eid, which is their right. If they want to book a day off, that's okay. But when it's a paid day that comes out of my tax, that I have to raise my flag and say, no, this shouldn't happen. So please, I need your response for that. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, I can see religion is a hot topic in this group,
Always.
and that's fine.
That's all.
As a socialist, as a secular humanist, as an atheist, I love to discuss this question. I would like to point out, so I'm going to start with the last question first, if you don't mind, and I'll work my way back.
Please.
The NDP Socialist Caucus has been in the forefront of the campaign in Ontario and in the NDP and the Labour movement to demand an end to public funding of Catholic separate schools. The Catholic school system is funded from kindergarten right through to the end of secondary school by public tax dollars. We are completely, totally opposed to this. This is a product of history. But that chapter in history should be closed, and we should open a new chapter, which is humanistic, secular, and progressive. It's a product of the fact that the Canadian state, which was created on the ashes of the civilization of the Indigenous people, who were completely marginalized, who were completely, their societies destroyed, was a deal between the French and the British merchant class. And they said, okay, in this country, we'll have the Napoleonic Code in Quebec, we'll have the British civil law in English Canada, and you'll have the public funding for Catholic and Protestant schools. Protestant schools. Protestant schools. So, I grew up in a Jewish family in North York, and in grade 2 and grade 3, they had the Christmas pageant, you know, and I had to play a role, you know, like one of the shepherds, you know, beside the manger. And, you know, I went home and I told my parents, and they said, what are you doing? What is this? This is not something that we subscribe to. Anyway, I learned later in life that it's all, you know, folklore, put it nicely. It's all folklore, right? It shouldn't be imposed on anybody. But I came up against the fact that we do not live in a secular system. You're absolutely right. This system is biased in favor of the Protestant Christian religion. And we still have the remnants of this in terms of the recognition of Christmas and certain paid holidays.
Next weekend, Easter.
And next weekend is Easter. Now, as a worker, am I going to go to the boss and to legislature of Ontario and the Parliament in Ottawa and say, I don't want this paid holiday. I want to go to work. No, I think workers should have more holidays. We need more time off. And unfortunately, when workers have a day off, they often take another job to have another income. You know? But anyway,
That's what my first.
I'm not going to say, you're right, brother. I'm not going to say that because of my secular, humanistic, or atheist views, I don't want a paid holiday. In fact, I think the work week should be shorter. Instead of 5 days, it should be 4 days, but without a cut in pay and benefits, to share the work so young people can get good jobs and we can reap the benefits of automation and other advances in the production system. So I'm for more holidays. And I'm willing to take it, even if they call it Easter, or even if they call it Christmas. When the workers take power, we'll change the name. We'll call it Rosa Luxemburg Day, or Vladimir Ilyich Lenin Day, or Öcalan Day, whatever you want, you know. Freedom Day, right? But we're not in power. So, you know, we have to deal with the situation that actually exists. But I just wanted to say that we have been in the forefront of the fight to end public funding of Catholic schools. Now, those who say we have to keep our schools secular are echoing, unintentionally, echoing the slogans of the far right wing. They're echoing Kevin O'Leary. They're echoing the woman who's a candidate for Tory leadership. What's her name?
Kelly Leach.
Kelly Leach. You know, they're echoing the neo-Nazis, the conservatives, the people who hate Middle Eastern people, who hate Asian people, who hate African people, who hate people from the Caribbean. Anybody who's different from their conservative, white-faced, white-bread society. And I don't want to be associated with them. In fact, I think that they're a danger to the working class. I think that's what future racist and fascist parties feed on. They feed on that. We have to cut off that source of energy, that source of protein for the far right. And the way to do it is to say, public schools, as long as you don't interfere with the curriculum, we want your parents to feel comfortable here, in this library, in this secondary school, in this child care center. We welcome everybody. And if you want to use a space for your devotions, whatever they may be, as long as it doesn't interfere with the curriculum, that's fine. And we stand up against the right wing who would seek to deny that, who would seek to target certain immigrant populations because of their culture, because of their language, because of their religion or non-religion, because of their origin. We think the road to workers' unity is inclusiveness, tolerance, and scientific argument. That's the way to deal with political Islam and other superstitious views that are harmful to women and other sections of the population. The brother asked, what's in it for you? What's in it for me? Fighting for...
Yeah, I meant the socialist action, not like personally.
Yeah, well,
you know what I mean?
It is me, I am it. I'm almost stunned by the question.
Okay, maybe I you know what?
A better world. My interest
yeah.
is in a better world.
Yeah.
That's why I do this. I've been involved in politics for 45
You
years.
misunderstood my question.
Our party has been devoted to
I'm
this.
talking about the NDP. I'm not talking about the socialist action.
Oh.
This is not, that was my
Okay,
question.
so I'm sorry.
My question is, if you believe that the NDP has a bureaucratic leadership,
Right.
why, as a socialist action party, is part of this NDP? That's my question.
Oh.
Yeah.
3 words. To destroy it.
Or you could be with the liberals.
No, but the Liberal Party is the party of Bay Street. The Liberal Party is the main party of the Canadian capitalist class. The Liberal Party has been the party that has governed for most of the past 150 years. It's the main party, not the Conservative Party. Conservative Party has ruled about 1/3 of the time. The Liberals have ruled the other 70% of the time. So, when Jewish refugees from the Holocaust came on ships to Montreal, it was liberals who said, none is too many, turned them away. It was liberals who implemented the War Measures Act. It was liberals who imposed wage and price controls under Trudeau, Senior. But there were no price controls, only wage controls. Price controls were a farce. And in response to that, the working class, through the Canadian Labour Congress, organized a general strike, which I remember. I remember it quite well. I participated in it as a young teacher. So the Liberal Party, the Conservative Party, even the Bloc Québécois, which is a bourgeois party, and the Green Party, that's not even a consideration. It's totally out of bounds for a class-conscious worker. The NDP poses a different challenge. It is a working class-based party linked to really existing working class organizations, unions, representing 4 million members. But it's not socialist. It's pro-capitalist. That's a contradiction. So the aim of socialists like us, you know what a wedge is? Any carpenters here? A wedge to open a door. I want to drive a wedge into that party to separate the working class members, voters, and their class interest from the bureaucrats. I want to drive a wedge between the workers and the bureaucrats and win the workers to a socialist perspective. And I say now for the 3rd time this afternoon, will that party ever, ever, ever become a socialist party? A true working class party for liberation of humanity? No. Let me repeat that. No. Let me repeat it.
No.
No. Never. Not tomorrow, not the next day, not 10 years from now, not a century from now. No, never. So why are we there? To drive a wedge between the workers and the bureaucrats. The bureaucrats, the $100,000 a year club, their interest is with the status quo, with the existing system. They want a nice long career, they want to advance, maybe even become a member of parliament someday. The workers who earn less than $50,000 a year, who are struggling to pay the mortgage to send their kids to university, who have trouble bringing relatives from overseas who are suffering. You know people like this? I know people like this. I'm with them. They're not convinced yet that my program is their program. Why did the NDP... So, Jack Layton was not a socialist. He centralized the party, tightened the grip of control, even though he had a beautiful smile and a nice mustache. He tightened the grip of control. So that's Jack Layton. The reason why the NDP did so well is because Jack spoke reasonable French, you know, English and French, and the Conservatives were very unpopular, and the country wanted change. And the Liberals were weak. They were sort of between leaders, so the NDP benefited from that. But that all changed under Tom Mulcair. What did Tom Mulcair do in the October 2015 election? What was his slogan? Do you remember? I mentioned it. I should have said that there would be a test. That's what I tell my classes. Tom Mulcair's slogan was not national childcare. His slogan was not Canada out of NATO. His slogan was not build 500,000 housing units on an emergency basis. No, try not. His slogan was balanced budget no matter what. No new taxes. Well, I don't think the workers should pay more taxes. We pay too much tax as it is. But I want to tax the corporations. I want to tax, you know, those with offshore bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. In fact, I want to expropriate their wealth. Block them from doing what they do. But Tom Mulcair said no new taxes. What did Justin Trudeau say? Justin Trudeau said, we're going to spend to create employment and rebuild Canada's crumbling infrastructure, and we don't care what it's going to cost. $10 billion more deficit, $20 billion deficit, whatever it takes. People responded to that. They said, I need a job. I want my kids to go to university. I need to pay off this mortgage. I'm going to vote for that. They were fooled. It was a tragedy. Class-conscious workers will know that if the Liberals say yes, it's no. If they say it's daytime, it's nighttime. Don't believe them. How do you know when a Liberal politician is lying? When he moves his lips. Right? But unfortunately, in this country, less than 20% of the electorate has even that elementary, basic, rudimentary level of class consciousness. This is not Kurdistan. This is not France. This is not Italy. This is Canada. Better than the United States, but not so good as other places. So they got fooled. So the NDP lost 1 million votes and more than half of its seats in Parliament because of Tom Mulcair. What did we do about that? We are just a few dozen socialists all across Canada with hundreds of supporters in the NDP and many supporters in the unions. What did we do about that? Well, we could have cried, we could have torn our shirts, we could have, you know, dug a hole and climbed into it. We organized. We said, Tom Mulcair has got to go. So we organized, we called a news conference. We said that we're going to be running candidates for the NDP executive, and we're going to favor what they call leadership review. What is leadership review? It means the convention votes. Do we need to have a leadership contest, or do we stay with the existing leader? Everybody said, everybody in the country, even some of our own supporters said, you don't have a chance. Mulcair has only been through one election. The party's going to give him at least a second chance. He's a good lawyer. He speaks French beautifully and English equally well. He dresses nicely. He cuts his hair. He has a nice beard, better than mine. You're not going to remove him. We said, we don't know if we will win or lose, but we're going to try. That's our attitude. We fight for the interests of the working class, whether the people predict that we will win or will not win. They said, leadership review, if Tom Mulcair gets 70% of the votes at the convention saying that he should stay on, that there's no need for a leadership contest, he's in for another 4 years. That's it, game over. We got closer to the convention. We held our news conference. We got people signing a petition. How many people signed that petition, Julius, across the country?
Hundreds.
Hundreds of people. We set up a website just for the purpose. The leader of the Canadian Labour Congress, the new one, Hassan Youssef, he said it's time for Tom Mulcair to go. Ooh. For him to say that, it's amazing. And then heads of some other unions said it's time for Tom Mulcair to go. We need a new program. We need a better agenda for working people. So we're on the eve of the convention. People were handing out Tom Mulcair, pens and signs and booklets. People were not taking them. They were piling up in the corner. It looked like things were changing. And when it came to the vote on leadership review, not only did Tom Mulcair not get 70%, he didn't get 60%. He didn't even get 50%. He got 48%. He had to go. So now we're in a leadership race. So are we just sitting back and waiting to see what happens? No, we've got a candidate in mind, a radical labor leader by the name of Sid Ryan. We're never neutral. We're never neutral. The working class party always takes a position. It might be the lesser of two evils, but we always take a position. We're not neutral. Rarely. I shouldn't say never. I was taught never say never. I was also taught, I told you a million times not to exaggerate. Think about it. Okay, so usually we take a position. And our position is, we can win this. We can win this leadership race if our candidate steps forward. And we hope he will very, very soon. Right? And with your help us to build this party, to fight in the unions for democracy and class struggle policies and against austerity, we can win. We can win many battles. And we go from small victories to big victories. And we will nationalize the banks. The banks are like a government within the government. You are absolutely correct, brother. Thank you for saying what you did. The banks, they use our savings to promote war, to promote corporate conglomerates and mergers that kill jobs, that industries that destroy the environment, that are indifferent to the suffering of the indigenous people and many, many others. The banks should be brought under public ownership and workers' control. It's not just as some campaigners say, well, we'll use the Bank of Canada and we'll print money and we'll spend it as we need in order to make infrastructure improvements and so on. That's not good enough. The Royal Bank of Canada, the Toronto Dominion Bank, the Bank of Montreal, the National Bank, the Big Five in this country, they control trillions of dollars. You can't even imagine that number. It has so many zeros. If you started writing it here, you'd have to go right through that wall. They control trillions of dollars. That money is the result of the surplus value created by the working class in production. That should belong to us. That should be used to eliminate cancer, to eradicate illiteracy, to put an end to homelessness. And in this rich country, it could be done just like that. So, absolutely right, and thank you for pointing out, the government within the government should be brought under public control. Should be democratically run and operated, and that's what we think about the banks. And I think I mentioned the banks along the way, but this is an opportunity to emphasize it. And the automated teller machines and their user fees and their extra charges is just so annoying when they have billions of dollars and they try to squeeze us for a little bit more, a few more dollars here and a few more dollars there. It just makes people angry. Just like the telecoms, the telecommunication companies like Rogers, fabulously wealthy. And in order to have basic cable, they rob you. What, $100 a month? All the services put together, phone and cable and whatnot? They should be nationalized too. Are they contributing to innovation? The only innovation the banks are contributing to is they're forcing their employees to sell you, financial products that you don't need. And they're suffering a big scandal right now. Big scandal. For that very reason. Selling people charge cards and other financial services that they don't need. The banks have had their day. They should be brought into public ownership.
Any last questions?
No.
Okay, so before we leave, we would just like to thank you on behalf of Dengekan for taking the time to come here and share your insight and enlightening us all on the current political situation in Canada and kind of abroad, worldwide. So thank you very much for that, Barry. And before everybody leaves, just a quick announcement for a May Day celebration. It's hosted by several communist parties of Iran and Iraq, and it's going to be on Saturday, May 6th. At 6:30 to 10:30, and it's at North York Memorial Community at 5110 Yonge Street in North York.
Can I make an announcement?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. We have a May Day celebration too, and it's a week earlier, so there's no conflict, and I'll be happy to join yours if you send me the address. I'll be even happier if you give me 2 minutes to give greetings at the gathering. But on Saturday, April the 29th, we will have speakers and live music, entertainment, and food and drink at the Free Times Cafe, 320 College Street. That's just a couple of blocks west of Spadina on College. Leaflets are on your chairs. Just a few weeks later, we are hosting our International Educational Conference. We call it Socialism 2017, 100 Years of World Revolution. What happened 100 years ago? The Revolutionary October, that's right. The Russian Revolution, the first workers' government, workers' state in the history of the world. And we still have many things to learn from that, to emulate that. So we invite you to come to our conference. I'm selling tickets. It's $15 today or $20 at the door. So you have to get your ticket today. And also helps us to pay for travel. And we have speakers coming from 5 countries. So buy a ticket today and visit the literature table because it's so heavy to carry all that literature home. So lighten our load, buy some literature. And thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with you all. Really appreciate it.